Hey everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm happy to have you here with me today. We have a lot going on in the kitchen today. Let me take you around and show you some of the things that we already have prepped here for today's projects. I'm not sure if we're going to get to everything here today because most of the things that we're going to be doing involve the pressure canner. And the pressure canner for these recipes takes a couple of hours per batch, and we have lots of batches of food to process here. So we might go into tomorrow to actually get all this food through the canner, but we'll definitely get a good start. The first thing that we have over here is a whole bunch of lard that has all been cleaned up. So all the meat bits have been removed and it was left outside, so it is partially frozen. And we're going to run it through our meat grinder, but it renders down way faster when it's small or when it's been run through a meat grinder like this. So I'm going to run all of this lard through and then we're going to get it to start rendering down using my slow cooker. Over here, we have a whole bunch of pork roast. I did another 6 pork roasts. I actually did 7, but we had some pulled pork for dinner last night, like I said in my last video. So we're going to be canning that up. And I am going to show you some of the finished product from the canning when we canned the other, I think it was 6 roasts that we did the other day. Dan used half of a jar yesterday and just threw it in with his pan of vegetables that he was frying up, and it was delicious. So I wanted to show you what the finished product looks like. A lot of you asked whether it gets mushy after cooking it and then pressure canning it for 90 minutes, and it doesn't at all. It's actually fantastic. I roasted up 2 turkeys yesterday. So here we have cut up a whole bunch of the turkey meat that we're going to can as well. I had to empty out one of my freezers to fit a beef that we had coming back from the butcher yesterday morning, which is why I have so much meat that I'm going to be processing today. And I boiled up several ham hocks. So this is the meat off the ham hock to make the stock. I also added some garlic, some onions, some carrots, and some celery, and I just cooked that down all day yesterday, and that stock smells amazing. Over here I have some onions, and I have 16 cups of split peas that I am softening right now, along with a bunch of diced carrots. So the broth that I made over there with the ham hocks, the ham hock meat, the onions, the split peas, and the carrots over here are all going to go in jars for split pea soup. This is a new one for me, but I have done a bunch of research on it, and I think that it is going to be absolutely fantastic. We love split pea soup in our house, and this recipe is very, very easy and simple. I also have both of the turkey carcasses that we had cooked up yesterday that we removed all the turkey meat from in my roaster oven. So I have one in this one and one in this one over here. I was thinking of using that stock to use as the base or as the liquid for canning the turkey. Because this is already cooked turkey, I do need to add a little bit of liquid to it. If it were raw, which you can do, you can pressure can raw turkey. I wouldn't have to add liquid because enough liquid comes out for it. But I have decided that I am just going to use water and salt to can up that turkey, because usually we use the turkey for just sandwiches. So just taking it out and using like mayonnaise or cranberry sauce, salt and pepper to make a really simple turkey sandwich, or we use it to mix like a kind of like a chicken salad except with turkey, and then we make something that we call turkey melts with them. So I don't actually need the stock for that, because usually I just discard the liquid out of the jar or give it to my animals. So I have decided that I'm better off to have all of this turkey stock to use as soup base for any other kind of soup that I want to make. So that's what I'm going to do with that. So as you can see, that is a lot going on in the kitchen. So how I handle when I'm going to have a big day like this is I get as much of the prep work done the day before as I possibly can. And this morning we all pitched in together and spent an hour getting I don't even think it took an hour actually, getting all of this food processed. So because I did all the meat cooking yesterday, everything was cool. So it was really easy to cut it up really quickly, get the pork all shredded up and all of that. And then now basically it's just a matter of getting everything into jars and run through the canner. And that's not really time consuming at all. The pork fat that I'm going to be rendering over here is probably the most time consuming of all the activities that we have to do today. Trying to decide which is the best order to do this in. It is to my benefit to get the pressure canners going because they're so time consuming as soon as possible. But I also have all of this pork. It's much easier to run pork, to either cut pork up or to run it through a meat grinder when it is partially frozen, which it still is, but it is thawing very quickly. So you know what? I think what we'll do is we'll get all this pork run through here first, and then I can actually just set that back outside and get that rendering a little bit later on, and then we can move on to doing the split pea soup. This is the tomato machine. What was the brand on this? Fabio Leonardi. I shared this with you a few weeks ago when we processed a bunch of tomatoes. It is absolutely fantastic. I love this machine so much. And it also came with a meat grinder attachment. So that's what we're going to use. I do have a small, I think it's called a Lex or it's Lem. A small one, which actually works really well as well, but it's a lot smaller, and I know I'm going to be able to cram all of this fat through here really, really quickly with this heavy duty machine. This is my first time using this machine, so we'll see how it does. If it's anything like how it processed those tomatoes, it should make very quick work of it all. So like I said, for rendering our pork fat, the majority of this is called leaf fat. It's the fat from around the kidneys of a pig, and it tends to be the whitest and the cleanest of all of the pork fat, and it is best for when you're making pies or anything that you don't want a porky flavor. One of the things that I can recommend if you don't want to have kind of a meaty flavor, well, there's two things actually when you're making lard. One is to remove any pieces of meat off of it that you possibly can. And the other is to really heat it up low and slow so you don't start really cooking it. Both of those things tend to work for making a nice white, clean, unmeaty flavored lard. So we're going to put a whole bunch in here. It's working well so far. We primarily use our lard for frying. I don't really use it in baking that much. That one this has a little bit more meat on it than I want, so I'm just going to set that piece aside. I only have a small crock pot, you can see it over here, and so I'm probably going to have to run a few batches through, but that's okay. It's cold enough. It's below freezing outside now, so I can actually just put this outside on the freezer. It'll stay nice and chilled until I'm ready to run the next batches through. I love when I find something that makes my job easier. It's so great. This is fantastic. So there we go. Huge bowl of gorgeous white lard. So I am going to set that aside for a few minutes, and we'll get that cleaned up after we get our pressure canners going. So we're going to load up our crock pot here. A little bit more in there. And then we will put that big bowl, just cover it up and put it outside on the deck, and it will stay nice and cold. I am not a huge fan of rendering lard as far as the smell of it goes, so I usually will put my crock pot outside. Sadly, it is too cold right now, and I would probably have to turn it on high, and I don't want to risk overcooking it. So I guess I'm going to deal with the smell of lard today. Okay, next up, split pea soup. So I found a jack. So what we're going to do for this soup is we're going to start with a teaspoon of salt in each jar, and I want to do 14, 2, 4, 6, 8. So I've added a teaspoon of salt to each of these jars, and I'm going to add a little bit of onion to each of these. I do have a lot of onion flavoring in the broth that I made already, so I'm not putting a ton of onion in here. So generally speaking, I am more of an ingredient canner than I am, and actually this is the way it is with all preserving for me, because I'm like this with my freeze dryer as well. I tend to freeze dry ingredients rather than recipes. And the reason for that is because usually I cook in bulk. I cook large amounts at once, and I find it doesn't really save me a lot of time to do all of the work to do pre-made recipes like this, because for us, for one meal, we would probably use 6 quarts. That being said, I do like having a few convenience meals in the pantry. Next up, we will add some of our diced carrots. It is recommended to pre-cook your onions before you put them in your canner. I don't know why, but I did it because that is the way it's recommended to do it. So the method for making soups, if you're canning soups and you're making your own recipes, is to obviously only use ingredients that you know are safe for pressure canning. Whatever ingredients you use the pressure canning times and weights for the ingredient that you're using that has the longest time. So if you're canning a soup and you're doing it with meat, meat takes in general 90 minutes for quarts. So you're going to be canning it for 90 minutes, even if you could can, say, carrots for less time. That probably makes sense, right? And that you're only filling your jar about halfway with the ingredients and the rest of the way up with whatever broth you're using. So what's kind of cool about this is you can create safely a lot of your own soup recipes based on your family's preferences. And I love that. I think that's fantastic. So I am going to add a little bit of pepper, but not very much. Just a smidge. If I hadn't already had bay leaves in my stock, I would probably put a bay leaf in one of these as well. So it is recommended to pre-cook your split peas. And because we actually prefer a really smooth split pea soup, I don't mind the fact that they are going to be mushy. So we're filling our jar up to about half, give or take a little bit, and then we'll be topping it off with our beautiful stock that we made. It smells so incredibly good. To be adding all of that broth. So as you can see, the split peas, oh, got some down the side of that jar. The split peas are very thick, but because I am going to be topping this off with my gorgeous broth that I've made over there, it is going to thin this soup out enough so that it is safe for canning. I think this is going to be so delicious with this amazing smelling broth. Oh, darn it. You know what I forgot to add? Shoot. I had all of the pork hock that I had made this broth with that I wanted to add to this. You know what I'm going to do is I will just throw the pork hock in the freezer in some little Ziploc bags, and then I'll just add one of those to the soup when we make it. That's too bad. That would have been really good. And I could take out some of the peas that I put in here, but that is more work than I am wanting to do at the moment. You know what I can already tell that would have been a smarter thing to do is to put the carrots up towards the top, because as you can see, the liquid is being stopped by the split peas. So I will definitely have to debubble these and then top them off with some extra broth. So I could have made this soup up in a pot and then canned it that way, but I wanted an equal number of ingredients, so carrots, onions, and so on, in each jar. And that's really hard to determine because you know, the heavier things sink to the bottom of your pot. So I find it works better to do it this way. Although the order that I put them in the jars definitely could have used some improvement. I wanted to talk to you about this shirt that I'm wearing, because you've probably noticed that these sweaters have become kind of my uniform. And I actually just purchased a couple of these. This is merino wool from a company called Simply Merino here in British Columbia, maybe a month or so ago. And I am somebody who's very sensitive to just fabrics in general. I find clothes kind of uncomfortable sometimes, and especially certain fabrics. And I have never been able to wear wool in my life. I'm also somebody who is cold all the time. So I've always been kind of sad that I haven't been able to wear wool because so this company came across my radar. I don't know if somebody had shared about it online. And the claim was that you can wear merino wool even when you can't wear other kinds of wool because it's not itchy. So I bought a top to try, and I put it on, and I felt like I had died and gone to heaven. It was the most comfortable, warm, but also can breathe kind of shirt that I have ever worn before. So I actually went and bought several of them. And I think probably throughout the winter, I'm just going to wear them all the time, because even as like an underlayer, because it's quite thin, they're not really thick. As an underlayer under a sweater or a sweatshirt or anything like that, it just helps give that a little bit of protection against the cold. And I don't know why I live up here where it's so cold, because I really don't like the cold at all. But I do. So dressing warm is important. And I also got a pair of leggings made out of the same fabric that I'm using as long johns, and they are just fantastic. I feel like this has changed my life, these shirts. I said to Dan when I put this on this morning, it's just like I instantly feel comfortable, just really comfortable. I love them so much. So anyway, I did contact the company and I asked if they had a discount code that I could share with you, and they did. So it's LMR 10. I'll put it down in the show notes as well, along with a link for the company. It's Simply Merino, and they do ship all over the place. The reason I love these shirts is for all the reasons that I just shared with you. But in doing some further research on the company, they also ethically source their materials, and they don't use any harsh chemicals or anything like that in the dyeing of the articles of clothing or anything like that. So that's just an added bonus for me. I'm just always so happy when I can find something that I find comfortable to wear. I'll probably just wear them exclusively until it's too warm again to wear them again. But I did see that they're coming out with some t-shirts, so you never know. Maybe I'm just going to be a merino wool girl. I am not someone who shops very much. I kind of have a few pieces of clothing that I wear all the time, which you've probably noticed if you've been here for a while. Fashion is not really my thing, but I am sure happy when I find something that I like. So just getting the tops of our jars all cleaned off. Here, this smells so good, my friends. Yum. And I have a whole bunch of the broth left here, so I'm definitely not going to let that go to waste. We'll can that up as well. It still looks pretty, actually. So I'm just filling up my pressure canners over here, and we're going to be canning these at 15 pounds of pressure for 90 minutes. Okay, we have those cranked up. So once they start steaming, we'll vent them for 10 minutes before we put our weight on. And now is a great time to clean this because it needs it. So I think what we're going to do to save a little bit of time, I'm going to get this cleaned up and this counter disinfected, and then we are going to get all of our jars filled up with all the meat that we have back here. And let me think about this. Yeah, we'll do that, and then I will put them outside so that all of them can stay cold, because it is meat, even though it is cooked. It needs to stay chilled. And then just before I'm going to put them in the canner, I'll bring them inside, let them come up to room temperature, and then add the hot water or soup stock, depending on the case, before they go into the canner themselves. And that way I can get my kitchen all cleaned up and then just be running my canners through for the rest of the day and not have all this canning mess everywhere. I think that's what we'll do. jars here. We'll start with pork. Oh, before we get into doing the pork, let me show you what our finished pork. So we've already dug into this jar. I just want to show you the texture compared to the stuff that hasn't been canned yet. And honestly, we didn't notice any difference. It's really hard to show you the texture, but if you can look at this, it's not mushy at all. Like, there's still total texture there. It's perfect. It still holds up great. It's not slimy or mushy or anything unappetizing at all. So, oh darn it, you know what I just realized? Is that I did not do onions for these. So with my other ones, I did a whole bunch of onions in my roaster oven and added caramelized onions to all of these. But since I forgot that step, we're just going to do straight up pork. I'll just mark these so that I know these ones don't have onions in them, and we'll just add onions if we want onions in them when we're going to use them. Teaspoon of salt. And we're just going to cram these full of this pork. So I roasted my pork at around 250 and then turned it up to around 350. That was probably for 2 hours or so. And then turned it up to 350 for the last hour. And then, like I said, I do all my meat roasting the day before when I am going to be canning cooked meat. And then that way it's cooled and easy to handle the following day. I think I'm going to use my leftover broth that I have and top some of these off with that. I went into a lot more detail about canning pork in my last video, so if you want to go and check that out if you'd like some more information. It's the video that came out before this one, and I'll see if I can link it down in the show notes for you or up here somewhere. There's a couple of benefits to pre-cooking your pork, but one of the ones that I didn't mention in my last video is that you will experience some shrinkage when you are cooking raw meat or canning raw meat, and you do avoid that. So you can actually fit more in each jar, which is really great for me. I like to pack as much into my jars as I can. I had a couple of people ask how many jars I'm at this point. I'm over 1,000 for sure, but I won't know the final count. We'll do a count just before we do our pantry tour video next week, and then we'll get the final tally. But I do think that I canned more this year than I have ever canned in years past, which feels pretty awesome. I love having a nice full pantry this time of year. And honestly, it is a ton of work. There's no question about that, especially because we grow a lot of our own food as well. But in the winter time, because of all this work that I did during the spring, summer, and fall, I get to take it a lot easier come winter. So I am looking forward to that break where I get to sit back and enjoy the fruit of my labors. All right, now on to our turkey. There's our timer. Okay, now for our turkey. So the turkey, I do find when it is canned, same with chicken, is it does dry out a little bit. But like I said, we do ours, we make like a chicken salad. And because we're adding a lot of mayonnaise for that, it adds some moisture to it so it's not so dry. It does help too if you do a mix of dark meat and light meat, because the dark meat doesn't tend to dry out quite as bad as the breast meat does. So the only thing that I have left that I want to can, oh, hang on, I gotta turn my temperature down now. is we're gonna get the turkey stock canned up, and that will be a tomorrow project because I do want that to cook overnight. But after we're done that, all I want to do is the onion jam, and I think that might be it. Oh my goodness, that would be very exciting. And we bought some more canning jars because I'm gonna need a few more. I don't think I mentioned this, but I am going to right now, I'm going to go add 2 onions into each of my roaster ovens, a handful of carrots, a handful of celery. Actually, I'll just throw these extra carrots that I had that I didn't eat in my soup into here. I'm gonna add some bay leaves, some garlic, and that'll be that for the soup stock or the turkey stock. I'm gonna get all of these run through the canner, and I'll be back with you as soon as we're done to show you what we ended up with. All right, friends, we are on to day 2, and I just wanted to show you what I got up to this morning. I got up bright and early and was a busy little bee in the kitchen today. So I have some lard done over here, and I'm really pleased with how nice and white and beautiful it looks. So this is after, of course, it's solidified. We are going to strain a batch off that I put in this morning just so that I can show you how I do it. I also canned up all of the broth. Look at how beautiful that broth looks. I got 14 quarts of turkey broth, and it is absolutely delicious. I think it might be one of the best turkey broths I've ever made, and I'm not really sure why. I don't know if the turkeys were just really good this year or what, but it was really good. And I wanted to show you also what I do to kind of deal with all these really grimy jars, because once a jar has been canned in the pressure canner, a lot of the fat and juices and stuff will come out during the processing, and your jars will get this coat of grease and just look awful. So I wash them just as I would wash dishes. I fill the sink full of hot soapy water, run them through that, and then if I am lucky enough to have some empty boxes, which I am right now, I think I have about 4 or 5 empty boxes from new jars that I just purchased, I will just fill those up, and then it's really easy to move them down to the pantry. So what we're gonna do right now, before we count and get a final tally on the amount of jars we ended up getting done in the last couple of days, let's get this. Oh, hang on, I just have to unplug it. Our lard over here that is in our Instant Pot. And I'm really glad I'm grabbing it right now because it is a little bit too hot. Even though I do have it set on low, it's starting to boil a little bit, and I prefer it not to boil because when it does, it tends to get a little bit more of a cooked flavor. So really glad I caught it now. As you can see, there's still some solid bits left in my lard. That's totally normal. What I'm going to use is my strainer and some cheesecloth, and I'll just strain it out into a bowl. I'm sure there's lots of different ways to do this. This is just the way that I do it. So just a metal colander stuck inside of a bowl like so, with my cheesecloth inside. Okay, I am going to need some gloves. And my favorite gloves to use whenever I am doing anything with fat or anything like that are these silicone ones, because you can just wash them off with some hot water after. So we're gonna take our lard and pour it right into our strainer here. And I'm just gonna fill this right back up again with some more of our fat. I have about 2 more batches to go before I'm going to be completely finished. And I'm going to take my cheesecloth and then drain it off. And as you can see, all the fat that's coming out is nice and clear. And then all of this lard is going to go directly into some jars, and it will sit on the counter until it has cooled. And then I am going to be storing a lot of this lard down in my little fridge that I have down in my pantry and also in the freezer. I'll probably just put a few jars in the fridge and the rest will go in the freezer, and then we'll just take it out as we need it. So I've talked about how I'm not a huge fan of gem jars, so I'm going to use these up for putting my lard in. I also used some of my miscellaneous jam jars from the grocery store, and this one had some honey in it. This is a good way to use up jars that you might not be able to use for canning for whatever reason. Look at that. It's beautiful. So the only thing that I have left to can now that's kind of on my list is that balsamic onion jam. So we'll do that together in the next video. And I think that's that. So let's just do a quick tally of how many jars we ended up with. 61 jars as our final tally. I am so happy with that. That just makes me absolutely thrilled. And I am also extra happy with the fact that all of these are just going to make winter cooking so much easier. I can mix a couple of these broths together with any of these jars of meat, throw in some veggies, and have a really quick and easy soup. We have this beautiful, well, let me wash the jar first. It's not looking so beautiful at the moment. There we go. That looks a lot better. But we have this beautiful ready-made soup here. One of the things that I will definitely just reiterate is to make sure that you don't fill your jar up any more than halfway full with your peas, because they will expand a lot and become quite thick during the canning process, and you want to make sure that you have enough liquid in there so that your product's not so thick that the heat can't penetrate. All right, friends, that is going to be it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.